Thanks very much, Wayne. And thanks to Lavinia for that excellent presentation on social media. I was just saying to her before I was putting my hand up for a few of it, like guilty. And then a few of it I was like, I kind of think I do that okay. So thanks for giving the reassurance and the guidance on social media. I'm sure we took a lot away from that. And this is actually a Canva. So just for those who don't know Canva, that's Canva. And we love those blurry images. They're nice and kind. So you can blur the image as much as you want on Canva, but you can. That's a Canva. And all through this you'll see Canva. So thanks a lot for coming along today. I really have enjoyed putting this presentation together specifically for you. Burnout is an interesting topic, and I think when we fully understand it more than we care to realise, people around us or ourselves have experienced it. There is a concept of stress that's involved in burnout, and we're going to talk about that today. And I'm going to talk very specifically about what the differences are. The talk's going to be a little bit different, and I'll explain that in a moment, in that it's not your typical, radio, we need to just go take a long bath and wine, as good as it is, Lavinia. Delegate, all the traditional sort of strategies that you can actually Google. You can Google all of those things. This is not about that, though those techniques are very important and very helpful. This is actually about your mindset. And when I say that, it's about not what you're thinking, but how you're thinking. And so, again, a fundamental difference today is not going to be about giving you information, it's going to be about creating awareness. I want you to get to know yourself in a different way today. And my hope in doing that is that you will come to understand when things are happening in your life and you're behaving in a certain way. You'll come to understand why that is happening, what might be triggering it, and if that's the case, then you can make changes so that it doesn't become a pattern. Sorry, I don't know what's going on. So, has anybody here seen the movie Eat, Pray, Love? It's all right, we're amongst friends, you can put your hand up. Yep. Anyone who hasn't, can I see those hands? It's okay. We will still be friends. But for those of you who haven't, it's a movie with Julia Roberts. It's basically a story about a woman who's, looking for life's purpose. She comes out of a painful divorce, bounces into a not so great relationship with a younger man, and then she comes out of that and she's basically searching for what is going on in her life. And there's a famous scene in it that says, her friend is saying, what are you doing? She wants to run off to Italy and India and Bali. And her friend, who's also her editor, says, what are you doing? This is crazy. You have lots of people around here who love you and support you. And she says, do you feel my love for you? Because I feel nothing. It's like I have no pulse. And sadly for us who have experienced burnout before, that's the difference. We've got stress in our lives, but burnout is when you have nothing. You feel nothing. And it's a sense of helplessness that we don't want to talk about because it's frightening. But today we're going to talk about it. And we're going to talk about in ways that help you understand if you or someone you love is experiencing burnout, how it comes to be, and how you can return to balance and not have the same situation occur over and over in your life. So the 3 A's of this presentation are creating awareness. That's what I want to do today for you. I want to have some level of acknowledgement. So I want to help you acknowledge what it is that you're seeing, feeling, hearing, thinking. And then I want to give you some momentum to take some action. Now those actions are going to be very unique and very different for each of you. But what I want to create is the momentum, the impetus for you to go, yeah, actually, I think that's how I have been thinking, and I think if I were to think this way, perhaps things would be different. So like I said, it's not your usual talk because I'm not interested in the social or the cultural context where blame exists. I'm not here to say, you know what, it's your husband, it's your job, it's your parents, the way you were raised, though that might have something to do with it. But I'm not here to have any kind of blame context. It doesn't interest me. It doesn't interest me here. It doesn't interest me on social media. It doesn't interest me in any part of my life to look for who's to blame. What I want you to do is I want to create connection. So I want you to feel that connection with yourself, with those in this room, with those around you that might be experiencing this stress or burnout. Because I want to help break the cycle for people. I want to help be part of a society where we don't believe that helplessness is normal. Because helplessness and the feeling of helplessness is not normal. But we have conditioned ourselves, I think, with everything that goes on in the world and everything that goes on in our lives to dull down and numb our feelings. Because there's that next task, the kids have got to be picked up, that job at work's got to be done. You know, there's always something. And so we sort of tend to dull down in a number of ways what we're feeling. And what I want you to do today is connect. Connect with that feeling, whatever it is for you, and connect with each other. And perhaps when you go home, connect with those that you love. Anyone frightened already? Did we mention it was group therapy? Did you read the disclaimer? It's on the back page just in case. So let's talk about stress. So stress, as the World Health Organization refers to it, it's kind of in a negative context. It refers to it as a reaction. It's the reaction that people have to different situations, primarily when they feel like they don't have the resources to cope. So in that sense, stress is the combination of a situation and your beliefs. Your beliefs that you can cope with the situation. Now there's good and bad stress, or helpful and unhelpful stress. So distress, the not so helpful one, you know, it's the one that causes anxiety and concern and worry, and you know, our tummies turn and we don't want to do whatever it is that's happening. We don't want to deal with it. But we do, and it causes sometimes illness. So on the other side of the equation is the positive stress, the helpful stress. Psychologists call it eustress, which is interesting. So eustress is the good stuff, you know. We're getting married, we're having a baby. That can also be distress, but mainly when we hear about it as eustress. We're going to buy a house, we've got a new job. And the eustress is the different helpful reaction, or the positive reaction that we have. Even though there's something that's causing a little bit of anxiety, we secretly, unconsciously I would say, have a belief that we'll be able to cope. It might be faint, especially when we learn that we're having that baby that we didn't really expect to have. That's not my life story, by the way. I expected to have all of my children. But eustress is a positive stress. So do we understand that there's helpful and unhelpful stress? Fair? So I didn't introduce myself at the front because this today is more about you. But my background is in mining, to be honest. Most of my career I spent in HR, leadership development, talent management, in mining. A lot of my time was P&H Mining, Joy Global, GE Mining, Industria. And I spent it in mining because I had the opportunity to work with people. But after a while, I was starting to feel a little bit cynical about, you know, the effect that I could have on people. And there was lots of infighting, and there was lots of politics and lots of dysfunction, you know, which is really, as I know now, just people trying to survive. I didn't know that back then, and so I left. And I went into the not-for-profit. I'm fast-forwarding my career really quickly. But I went into a not-for-profit business that was struggling. It was a disability organisation. And these people weren't paid a lot of money, and I'd come from a place where, you know, we were paid reasonably well. These people were not paid so well in accordance to my standards, and yet they were the happiest staff that I had ever seen. And I was amazed. Like, the job that they did as a support worker, for what they received, how could they be this content? This motivated. And so I started to look at the psyche. I started to look at the contributors. And in the end, as I came in as a consultant in that organisation, I ended up being their CEO. And it was the best job that I've ever had. Working in a place where people understand their purpose, that go to work every day to make a difference, I did not understand the impact that would have on my life. It was shaping for me. And much of my practice today, Sincerus, primarily based on my mum, but a large part of it is based on that organisation that I was with and watching what happens when you can tap into people and have them see their resources. After that, I got involved into NLP, and I'm a master NLP practitioner. And NLP is all about how you think, which I'll explain later. But there are a number of principles that go with NLP, and one of them is that the mind and body are connected and therefore they affect each other. And anyone who doubts that need only get nervous about doing a talk, and what happens? Your palms get sweaty, your voice starts to shake. That's your body being connected to your thoughts. Or if you get really anxious, you will run off to the bathroom. That is definitely your mind connected to your body. So the mind and body are definitely connected. And why is this important? Because I want you to think about the last time that you were positively stressed. Something good, remember? Think about the last time that something was happening, that you had that thing of excitement happen within you. That siren might be the next slide, which is the negative stress. But right now, think about something that's happened that in the past you were so excited about. You remembered that nervous. Can you think of something in your mind? Don't need to share it. Nobody's going to share any of these situations. Can you think of something where you're a little bit like, ooh, this could be fun? Yeah? Got something in your mind? I want you to think about where in your body you're feeling that right now. Again, we don't have to share, just think about it. Where did you feel that positivity, whatever it is that you were feeling like, ooh, this could be fun? Where in your body? Because it's somewhere in your body. And then I want you to think about, what do you remember hearing when you recall that positive situation? And this will be different for all of you. What emotions do you remember noticing? Happiness, excitement, joy, curiosity? What was it? And this is important. What do you remember seeing? What's the visual that comes up on your mind when you think about that positive situation? And just get it on your mind. And then what were your thoughts? This is going to be great. I can't wait. Whatever it is to you. Now hold that for a moment. Now I want you to think about the last time you were negatively stressed. What did you just notice happened? Everything dropped. For some, yeah. But can you feel the notable change in your body? And now I want you to think about, and in your workbook, I want you to jot down. Every time you see one of these little things here, I should have said, the little book on the side, there's something in your workbook. If you want to. You don't have to. You can take it home. But I want you just to jot down that last really unhelpful stress moment, that one that, geez, you wish you did not have to deal with or hadn't had to deal with. Where did you feel that in your body? What did you hear when you recall that moment? That really not so great moment. What do you recall yourself noticing as emotions? Was there sadness? Fear, doubt. And then what do you remember seeing? Was there lots of people around? Were they moving slowly? Were you on your own? What is that image that comes into your mind? And then what were you thinking? Think about what was going through your thoughts. Why me? Not this again? Whatever it was for you. These are just some of the examples when I talk to clients that they tell me when they think of stressful moments. Tightness in the chest, heavy in the head, shallow breathing. But just note it down for you. Now this gentleman, Gabor Mate, I don't know if any of you have heard of him, he's written a lot of books. One of them in particular I would recommend, it's called The Cost of Hidden Stress. And When the Body Says No is basically what the book's about. He talks about that when we're looking at healing, because ultimately I'm a therapist, I see people every day, all day, with different challenges. And the intention that I have is to help them heal from whatever it is that they are experiencing. Anything from anxiety, to heartbreak, to grief, trying to overcome nervousness, people who want to have confidence. Basically, we're trying to heal. And Gabor Mate says that in healing, every bit of information, every piece of truth is crucial. And that's why I'm getting you to understand what it is that you feel when you are happy and positively stressed, and the difference when you are not. Because tuning into that, there are symptoms and signals for you to pay attention to as you're going about your life. And as I said before, we've lost contact with a lot of them. You know, we take a Panadol when we have a headache, which is great, but I'm curious about why you've got the headache. In your workbook again, there is like a chart. It's probably a very technical term for that, I don't know what it is, but there it is on the screen. I want you just to note in your workbook, thinking about today, and given that there are many different areas in your life, just chart how stressed you are today, given that you've just felt into what stress feels like for you. Just chart. How stressed are you, really? Like today? How stressed are you? You might not be so stressed at the moment, but maybe you are. Maybe there's a million things going through your mind about what you need to get to after this talk, or after this day, or after this week. How stressed are you? And just note it. And then in your workbook, what I want you to do is just pause for a moment, and this is when I'm working with clients, I think they get sick of this question. If there's anyone in the room, sorry that you have to hear it again, but I want you to note down your key takeaway, just from stress. That's all we've talked about just then. The reason asking this question is really important is because it embeds in your unconscious mind what you have actually taken away. So it imprints it into your memory when you're forced to call it into your conscious mind and recall it and look at it. You'll actually remember writing it down, strangely enough. So just for a moment, write down in your workbook what your key takeaway is, having learned what you've learned about stress just then and how you experience it, positive and not so positive. What's your key takeaway? So even the Dalai Lama talks about burnout, which I find fascinating. And he says that in dealing with those who are undergoing great suffering, if you feel burnout setting in a number of words, his advice is to withdraw and restore. Why? Because it's good for you and it's good for those around you. But how often when we're feeling overly stressed do we just push on? Like, what does withdraw mean? Like, who withdraws? Like, soldier on. Burnout was a term coined back in the 1970s by a gentleman called Herbert Freudenberger. I always have to look at the screen because I end up saying Freud and Herdenberger or something like that, so I just had to pause again. But this gentleman, he explained and researched burnout in the sense of that it was primarily related to people in the helping industries, like doctors, nurses, and he characterised it as feeling emotionally exhausted, depersonalised, as in having no empathy, not being connected with self, and some other symptoms there. But my important point about this slide is that he associated it with these people in these helping professions as having high ideals. The reason that they're getting burned out is because they've got these high ideals of helping people. Now, not to underestimate the power of his work, because I'm going to give you some more information about the studies that he did so you can help understand where you're at in terms of burnout. But now when we look at burnout, like the World Health Organization, it refers to it as an occupational phenomenon. And often you'll see burnout just related mostly to the workplace. Whereas if you look at Black Dog, which I like their descriptor, they talk about more worldly, more life, not just work. Like burnout can be caused because you've got stress in a number of areas in your life, which is why I just had to chart that on your little chart. But it's not just about having burnout in a number of areas of your life, it's about persistent and unrelenting stress. So you'll see here that Black Dog refers to emotional exhaustion in response to persistent and unrelenting stress. And this is the difference, because we can have stress, even unhelpful stress we can have, if it's situational based. It's just, I can be stressed when I heard that police siren. It's gone now. And so's my stress. And that's primarily how we were designed as humans, for stress to operate, the fight or flight response. That's what it was for. It was to keep us alive, and those heightened symptoms that you felt before when you were charting it in your workbook, that's what helped us as humans back then to know whether to run. But as life has evolved and people have got busier, we've numbed that, and now we're not quite sure when to fly or when to fight and who to fight. So this concept of persistent and unrelenting, I want you to just look at your workbook and just circle. I think I put this in a slide further down, but just circle those areas on that wheel where you've noted that there's stress, and circle the ones that have been persistent and unrelenting. Maybe you feel stressed today because, the kids didn't go so well to school this morning or something, or there was traffic. But persistent and unrelenting, think about the last 2 or 3 months in those areas and circle them. So we might assume that reaching burnout is, the equation of excessive, unmanaged stress. We think we can't cope, so we don't manage it. Coupled with chronic, so persistent and unrelenting, those areas, equals burnout. That's not a great slide, actually. I'll have to remember that. But in essence, what Freudenberger says is there's 12 stages, and in your workbook you'll see the 12 stages. I have a really big copy here because I don't have my glasses on. Can you see that print? I'm sure you can see it from there. I'm struggling to see it up here. And I'm not going to read all of the 12 stages because I've put them in your workbook for a reason. I've put them in your workbook so that you can look and see, do I recognise any of that in myself? Do I recognise that I'm now looking at some of this tough life that I have as normal? Do I recognise myself kind of looking at people who were once important in my life and going, you know what, that's not as important. You are not as important. I need to get this done. And you're deprioritising people in your life, or deprioritising social situations in your life. The interesting thing about this 12-stage model is that it starts with this concept of having excessive ambition and perfectionism, the compulsion to prove. That's how the burnout cycle starts. Because other than that, every day is just a day, and you're doing the best you can. You're not trying to prove anything to anyone. You just want to do a good job. But when that issue of the compulsion to prove yourself kicks in, that's when burnout starts. So it's very subtle. And as a therapist, I'm interested when that compulsion started for people. When did you learn that A, you had to be perfect, B, it had to be all the time? Where did you learn that? And as Gabor Mate also says, when you see people having behaviours, like we might see someone have an angry outburst, the question is not why are they angry? The question is not what's wrong with them. The question is what's happened to them. And it's not what happened to them today, because they're angry. It's what happened to you way back when you learned the way to deal with this situation is to get angry. That's the question. So in that list in your workbook, if you care to, just circle where you might have seen yourself behaving in certain ways. These workbooks are just for you to take home. You don't have to put anything in there if you don't want to. But I'd encourage you, because you're in a safe space, and I have time available after if I've upset you in any way. So as we did before, that was the circling of those areas about persistent, unrelenting. And now that you know the characteristics of burnout a little better, I want you to now look at the other chart in your book. And I want you to just indicate now, like, am I burned out in the past couple of months? What's my prevalence of experiencing these things? And just chart it. I'm just going to check the time, Wayne. Oh, remarkable. Yes. So, burned out? Don't be silly. Like, you're just stressed. Get over it. Have a rest. Take a bath. Get a wine. You'll be fine. Maybe not. Maybe there's something more to burnout. So now in your workbook, again, I want you just to think about that key takeaway, knowing that there is a difference between stress and burnout. What's your key takeaway on burnout as you think about yourself? What is your key takeaway? Just from that session. Back to Eat, Pray, Love. I don't want to know how many times I've watched that movie. It was fun research anyway, even though I've already seen it. But there's a scene also in the movie where, Julia Roberts is lamenting. She can't get this last love out of her mind, and there's this wise old guy who's been at the Indian ashram for a long time trying to heal himself. He's a bit of a cynic as well. And he says to Julia Roberts, when she's agonising, worried, stressed, anxious, he says, look, you need to learn how to select your thoughts just the same way that you select your clothes every day. Because that's a power that you can cultivate. The power to select the thoughts that you want today. What are the thoughts you want? If you want to control things in your life so bad, work on the mind. That's the only thing that you should be trying to control. Now, the next part of this session is some therapy time. Group therapy, safe space. You've got your workbooks. Nobody's going to be asked to say anything. But I want to give you some exposure to some of the questions and some of the style and dialogue that happens in a therapy session for you to think about when it comes to burnout and stress for yourself. I want you to think about this pattern. Now that you know what stress and burnout are, now that you know how you experience it, I want you to just think about, I'm not going to have a hands up who's experienced burnout or stress, so I'm just going to make some, generalised assumptions that you know or you have yourself. You either know someone who's experienced it or you have yourself. I love patterns. I love patterns of behaviour in people, because when I see patterns of behaviour in people and in myself, there's a story behind it. And the pattern with burnout goes something like, unresolved burnout goes something like work burnout, rest, recover, work. Burnout, rest, recover, work. And that fascinates me because I want to know how people got there. I know how I got there, but my story is different. And everyone in this room has a different story. The questions to ask yourself, and what I would ask a client who came into me with this situation is, what do you believe about yourself as it relates to how you get to burnout? What do you believe about yourself? And in your workbook, you can write down, but I'm going to fast forward a little bit to show you how this works, because what we're going to do is elicit a belief statement. So I would say to the client, what do you believe? Like you're here at burnout again. Like, what do you believe about how you get to burnout? And they'll go, oh, well, I just can't keep up with everything going on in my life. Fair call. And then I would say, how do you know that? What is your evidence that you can't keep up with everything in your life? And they would probably say, well, I keep dropping the ball tab and letting things slip, and everyone just gets upset with me. Fair. Seems like fair evidence. What causes that? And they would probably say, well, I just keep taking on things to help others, even though I'm already at capacity. Any truths? Who here has taken on something, even though they know they're way too busy because they want to help someone? Wow. Yeah. All of us do things for a positive intention. Every single behaviour we have has a positive intention. If it didn't have a positive intention, we wouldn't do it. The positive intention might not be so obvious. When people start hurling abuse at each other and arguing, we go, what's the positive intention there? But there is a positive intention. The person who's getting quite angry and irate might get some sense of control. That might be the positive intention. Might feel validated. That might be the positive intention. Every single behaviour we have has a positive intention. It's the core of understanding addiction in society, and that's the core of understanding violence. What's actually going on here? So this is how we move what you tell me in a session about what you believe. We move these things around to understand what's really going on. And in the workbook, I've got a way that you can extract this for yourself later on. But here's how it works. So remember, this is what the client said. I just can't keep up with everything going on in my life. I keep dropping the ball, letting things slip, and everyone gets upset with me, and I'm just taking on things to help others even when I'm already at capacity. And we agree it sounds familiar. So when we flip this around, using the exact same words, just changing the order. Remember, this is what the client said. And this is what you will say in your workbook, whatever it is to you. It then becomes, I take on things to help others even when I'm already at capacity. And I keep dropping the ball and letting things slip, and everyone gets upset. Therefore, I just can't keep up with everything going on in my life. Now, why is this important? Because the core of what's going on here is a belief. And the belief, if I could show you, I don't have a little light. The belief they've got is that I take on things to help others even when I'm already at capacity. The belief is not, I can't keep up with everything in my life. Therefore, the focus of the session would be way down there. And if you rung true about I take on things even when I'm at capacity, then I'd love that discussion with you to understand when you learned that. When did you learn that you take on things even though you don't have capacity to do so because you help others? This is a very quick model on NLP, which I won't take a lot of time to explain, but the importance of it is that the way NLP works, neuro-linguistic program, neuro being of the brain, of the mind, the nervous system essentially, L, linguistics being language, the way we communicate, body, words, and P being programs, which is just strategies, programs we use. The way it works is an external event happens in our life. Like, for instance, I always use the example that my office is in John Street. It's down the end of John Street towards the library, just sort of under the overpass bridge that comes up to Muswellbrook. And in winter, if I'm working back, it's dark at night time, and under the bridge, sometimes people congregate under there. They might be going for a walk or, getting away from their parents, whatever it might be. And so, depending on what I believe, which is the first filter that the situation goes through. If I believe, for instance, that, youths in groups is dangerous, they're always up to no good, if that's my belief, which is not, but if it is, then when I see people outside my office when I'm working back and they're congregating under the bridge and they've all got black hoodies, I will distort, delete and generalise that information, because the brain can only process 7 plus or minus 2 pieces of information at a time. So I have to distort, I have to generalise, I have to delete stuff. I can't handle everything that's coming in at once. So I'll generalise and delete and distort in accordance with what I believe. So if I believe the area is unsafe, if I believe, kids in black hoodies, in small groups, at night time is dangerous, I'm going to filter everything through that. And in my mind, even though I'm sitting at my desk, still, I'll create a little movie. And the movie will be like, when I go out to my car, they're going to give me a hard time. They're going to sort of say stuff and think it's funny, and I'm going to fumble with my keys. And this movie has already started in my mind. We all do this, by the way. Not this story, but we all do this. It's how we process information. When I've built that story in my mind, and remember this is happening in a millisecond, I then enter into a state. I might get anxious, fearful, nervous. I might even get frustrated. No, I'm going to have to leave early because I won't want to let it get dark, and now I've got to hurry up this job. I really wanted to stay back. This whole thing is happening. I still haven't left my desk. Nothing's happened. The kids aren't even there. I'm thinking about it though. After that state occurs, my physiology changes, my breathing changes. I might sort of shallow breathe a little bit. My hands might get a little bit sweaty. My muscles might tense up. Ultimately, I'll have a behaviour. Someone might walk into my office door and I'll go, what? They're like, wow, she's cranky. It's got nothing to do with the person walking in. It's got to do with this external event that I have manifested in my mind and the reaction that I'm having, no different to if I have a belief that says, I just can't keep up with everything going on in my life, or I take on things to help others even when I'm already at capacity. That one down there is the root of all evil. It's called resentment. Because if you believe that's what you have to do, and you keep doing it, and you keep ending up with that top one, then you'll start to feel resentment. And that's part of burnout, when apathy kicks in. Is this resonating with anyone? You don't have to nod. It's all confidential here. Jack, turn the video off. No, it's okay. So what I would generally do in a client session is I would say, let's talk about this I take on things. And in your workbook, again, these are numbered steps to guide you later on when you want to unpack your thoughts about anything. It doesn't have to be about burnout. This works with anything. Eliciting belief statements works with anything. And I would say to the client, this issue that you take on things to help others even when you're already at capacity, what do you believe about that? And in your workbook, there's a space for you to answer that question when you have filled it out. And they would tell me whatever it is. And I would say, what do you gain? What do you gain when you do this? Because every behaviour has a positive intention. And they would tell me, oh, well, I gain peace because I know that, I won't have to deal with whatever later. Okay, so you gain peace. Whoops. Sorry. I don't know. Keep talking.
And it just takes a couple of seconds to come back on.
Am I supposed to push something?
Yeah.
I can keep talking.
Yeah.
So, I would then ask them, if you weren't doing this, whatever this behaviour is, thank you, what would you be doing instead? And so to the people in the room who resonated with, I still take on stuff even though I'm already busy, I say to you, if you weren't doing that, what would you be doing instead? And in your workbook, there's space for all of this reflection. What I'm really curious about is this space. These question marks show just before you start working again, getting productive. What's going on there for you? If burnout is, thank you. If burnout is something that you've experienced or stress. And then just after, when work is kind of just normal production, you're just getting on with your job, just before you get to burnout, I'm curious what happens then. I'm curious what you believe then. What kicks in? But we're not going to go into that today. I just want to plant these ideas in your mind. So a key takeaway from just some small pieces, all we experienced there was eliciting belief statement. We used some meta questions. But what's your key takeaway even from just asking yourself some of that as it relates to how stressed or the pattern of stress and burnout you have in your life? And just jot down your key takeaway in your workbook. Have I got 10? Yep. So Albert Einstein, one of the few people who has fuzzier hair than me, he says that we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking that we use to create them. And in NLP, Robert Dilts had a model called logical levels. It adopts similar principles to Einstein's thinking, which says that when we have a problem in our life, looking at it at the level that it's occurring will not give you the solution. So you've heard people say, or you watch people too, who leave jobs. They go from job to job to job. Oh, I hate it here. Like everyone's unfriendly, Oh, I don't like it here. It's all infighting. I'm going to another job. Okay. How's that job going? Oh, no, I left that job. Too much infighting. Too much politics. Oh, that's a shame. Catch up with them another year. How's that job going? Oh, no, I left that job too. I'm still so unhappy. Keep leaving jobs. And this is what the model is all about, is that if you're having troubles with the job that you're at, changing jobs is very unlikely to provide a long-term solution. And so the concept of the model goes up and up. If you're having trouble with a behaviour, simply changing your behaviour is probably not going to have a long-term solution. Increasing your capability, which is what we're trying to do today, giving you more information, is more likely. Further on up through the levels, helping you understand what your beliefs and values are and changing them. So who here believes that beliefs can be changed? Yay. Yeah? In client sessions, when I say to them, do you want that belief anymore? That belief that you just, I'm just the helper in the family, that's what I do. Do you want that belief still? They go, no, but that's what I believe. I'm like, let's change that belief. And they're like, what? But that's exactly what we do. We use a process called submodality belief change. And we change the way that belief, which is just a memory, that's all it is. We change the way that you've stored that. And I say, what would you like to believe instead? And they tell me, and we change it to that. It's not that simple. There's a few steps involved, but that's what we do. So beliefs can be changed. The trick is knowing what you want to believe instead. Just like the trick is understanding where you want to be instead of where you're at. If you weren't stressed and burned out, how would you be? How do you want to be? So knowing what you know now and experiencing what you've just experienced then in your workbook, I want you to think of a time that if it had happened in the past, those old thoughts about stress and burnout might have come up. So think about a time in the future where you might, if it had happened in the past, respond in that similar way. Can you think of a time in the future that might bring you some stress or some burnout? And just notice now how you respond differently. Maybe there's different options, different alternatives. So in closing, Eat, Pray, Love, one of the famous statements that Julia Roberts says as she's sitting in one of the derelict buildings in Italy that's been run down and overgrown. She says, if you're brave enough to leave behind everything familiar and comforting, which can be anything from your house to bitter old resentments, and set out on a truth-seeking journey, internally or externally, and if you're truly willing to regard everything that happens to you on the journey as a clue, and if you accept everyone you meet along the way as a teacher, and if you're prepared most of all to face and forgive some very difficult realities about yourself, then the truth will not be withheld from you. And so, thinking about the presentation today, what I want is for you to become aware of what the truth really is within you as it relates to your stress and your burnout. And if you're here because you want to support someone else, then perhaps consider that they have their own truth. And I hope that in thinking about these questions, that whatever problem that you face in work or in life, in your business, that you can pause and instead of asking what's happening to me, what's wrong with me, ask yourself what's important to you in that moment. And if you see a cycle emerging, I would ask yourself to reach out for some support. There's pages on the back of this workbook of support where you can reach out. It doesn't have to be someone like me, a therapist. Happy to help if it is. But if you want to break the cycle, if you're tired of getting stressed, burned out, then at least acknowledge there is a cycle. And there are questions you can ask yourself to uncover what's going on. So thank you very much for your time. Any questions?